All right, we are live. Good morning. I am running a little behind schedule, but that is okay. Let me just share my screens and we will be ready to rock. All right, good morning and welcome to the Board Gaming Breakfast. My name is Sam and I'm the host for today, representing the McMeeples. For those of you who are new to the channel, this live stream happens, it's a weekly live stream where I like to go live every 8 a.m. weekday to talk about a game that's been on my mind that I've been enjoying recently. Been talking about and to talk about the mechanics and other things of that nature of why I find the game so enjoyable. Then we move into the second phase of the live stream where we'll add a random game mechanic into the game of the day. And then we'll finish up by designing a game in about 4 minutes or less. So sit back, enjoy your breakfast, and let the good times roll. I don't know. I don't have a catchphrase yet, so that's okay. But first, what I would like to I don't have the box top for it today because all of my content for it is in one of those old uh, Staples paper boxes. But the game of the day is Heroscape, and Heroscape is the oldest game in my collection. I've owned it since middle school, I think, so probably almost close to 2 decades now that I've owned it. But Heroscape is a miniature skirmish fighting game, and it was released by Hasbro. It's discontinued now, so it's extremely hard. It's not super accessible to the public to get these days. But the overall premise of it is it's played. I believe you can play up to 4, but it plays best at 2. And what you're doing is you'll build this map and terrain with these multi-use hex tiles, and try and battle to the death. And so I'm not going to do a full rules explanation, but I'm going to highlight some of the parts that drew me in as a kid to want to continue to play Heroscape. And I won't be showing any of the minis today because those are stuffed in tote boxes in a place that's not easily accessible. It doesn't play. We don't get it to the table that much, but uh, it's still a very big nostalgia game for me. Oh, I guess I 3D printed some pieces of train, but that's okay. All right, so the mechanics that I like most of the game of the day, 2 of them aren't actually even mechanics, but just quality of life parts of why I was so addicted to collecting the game. So I'll talk about those first. And the first is the terrain. So I only grabbed a few pieces, but I don't know if that audio is picking that up. But what you'll be doing before you even start the game is you'll create the map and battlefield that you're going to be fighting on. And so the terrain is not only beautiful to look at, but there are small movement rules attached to it that make the game a lot of creates a little depth to the strategy around it. The first being that every character has 4 main, uh, I guess, stats assigned to them. So you have its move, its range, attack, and defense. The movement is the number of spaces that it can move in a turn. And the terrain affects that because if you ever enter a water space, you lose the rest of your movement. Whenever you're going up in elevation, it costs an additional step per space that you climb up. So to go from this space up to this stone space, it would cost 1, 2, 3 movement points to just get on top of that. And so it affects your movement as well as when you have the higher ground, you have an advantage for uh, combat. And so the combat is represented by these dice, which, as you can see, there's been heavy use to them because I actually had to get rid of probably a dozen of them because the symbols are so worn away from the use of the game. But that is where your attack and defense stats come into, where the number associated to them is the number of dice that you roll. And so I think not only is the terrain beautiful when all set up and sprawling, and you have these ruin pieces that you can add into it. We ended up collecting and getting the castle expansion, so you can create this massive castle that you have to try and break into. But it creates this fun scenery, if nothing else, which is part of the reason why I was so obsessed with collecting it, because it felt almost like the Lego feel to me. but that is one of the parts that I like about it. The second has to do with these cards. So each unit gets a card associated to them. And then there's two types of units. There's heroes, that is just a single character, and squads that have multiple units that are associated to them. And there's two sides to the cards. So there's the basic side, which I've never really played on, because when I was taught this game, I learned straight from the advanced side, which is just the stats of the character, and when you kill them and remove them for the board. This is the lighter version of it, but where the depth really comes into play is on the back side. And so the differences between the front and the back is it starts to introduce line of sight. It gives you how many health points that each unit has, where a squad only has 1 health per unit, but a hero has multiple health to it. We got some comments in the chat asking for the Deathwalker. I will do my best to find that. Boom. It was in the stack that I grabbed, so we got the Deathwalker here. I'll explain the funny story behind that in a second. But then each character not only has its archetype, but it tells it whether it's a unique hero or squad, meaning how many of those type of units can be on the battlefield, and it'll give it a height. And the height is associated with the, you can't climb higher than the unit is, so that is, I believe, the only thing tied to the height. But each character or squad has special abilities to them, which changes up the tactical nature of them. And each unit or card has a cost assigned to it. So our Deathwalker 9000 has a unit cost of 140, whereas the minions of Utgar only have a cost of 110. And then we got some lighter characters like the Tran Viking Warriors that only have a unit cost of 50. And so what the cost is associated with is at the beginning of each game, or before you play a game, you'll set the point level of your squad that you'll be drafting. And so say we wanted to have a shorter game, maybe we'd only draft from 100 points of value. And what would happen there is you would roll the d20 to determine who goes first, and then the second player gets to pick twice, and then you alternate back and forth until the players have drafted a 500 point worth of army, and then you would set it up on the battlefield and begin to go. And that drafting portion of it was always the most fun for me. So I grew up playing this with my cousin Tommy, and we probably spent like 6 or 7 summers where he would come up from Virginia and we would have a family gathering and we would sneak the Heroscape collection to whatever location that we were staying at, and we would do like 3-hour sessions of battling to see who was the supreme ruler of Heroscape. What do we got going on in chat? Michaela's blowing up chat today. So Michaela, for those of you who are new, is my fiance. She makes fun of me because I say that every time I talk about her. But she said, "Where's the Deathwalker? It's the best unit." I did like the drafting on Heroscape. So she is, because I'm on a little bit of a delay, she's realizing that we're talking about the same thing at the same time. So cute. I lost my train of thought. So, right, drafting. So yeah, drafting is probably more fun to me than the actual gameplay of it, because how the standard rounds will work is each player will be given 4 shield tokens. And so these are the shield tokens. So on the back, they all look the same, but on the front of them, they all have a number or letter assigned to them because there's the X. And what you'll do is you have, the cards that you've drafted for the round, and you're assigning which one in the turn order that you're going to activate them for the round. So I might have something like this, where maybe I got a third character over here, and this would be my setup for the round. So once we've rolled for initiative, I would then reveal my shield 1. That would be who I move first, then 2, then 3, and I bluffed that I was going to use this guy for the round. So that's how the turn structure works, and then you will move, activate any abilities that you have, and then claim which target that you are going to be attacking based on line of sight. So you can see the little green dot is where the unit would be looking from, and the red highlighted outline silhouette of the character is the hittable space. Any gray material represents a weapon or something that is not going to trigger any damage. And so once you've confirmed that there's line of sight, and you determine which character you will roll for, the attacker will get their dice pool and the defender will get their dice pool, and then you'll roll, and the attacker deals damage for every skull that they roll. The defender will block based on the number of shields they have. Based on what characters are attacking and defending, there might be special effects to there. But that, in a nutshell, is how Heroscape is played. And my favorite parts of it are the draft and, honestly, the set building, of building out the terrain, because it's fun to see kind of the different worlds come to light. And so maybe you play one game where there's this massive river running through the terrain, so it's better to have ranged units because that's going to slow them down. Or maybe there's a giant mountain at the side of one, so you're bracing to try and summit the mountain, because then you'll have a tactical advantage for the rest of the game. All those little twists that are into the terrain. It was always fun to build one map and then have 2 or 3 battles once you learned, oh, holding this point of high ground was really powerful. So when we draft again, I'm going to take the Elven Archer because he clearly has the most range. And if I can, bolster him with a couple other defending units, and I can have my Kelda, the Kyrie warrior, if he takes any damage, maybe I can heal him. It's the whole theory crafting was probably my favorite part of Heroscape. So a lot of nostalgia baked into this game of the day. We don't play it a ton, but it will always be in our collection somewhere, even if it's propping up other games. But the side note, which I don't have the characters with me today, but every single character came pre-painted too. And as somebody that wasn't a big painter when in my youth, that was really cool because the plastic wasn't just gray, and they were a lot prettier to look at. So that is Heroscape, the game of the day. So let me know in the comments below what your favorite parts of Heroscape are. If you've played it before, I'd love to connect with fellow Heroscapers. There aren't many of us in the hobby space, so it's fun to find one in the wild here and there. Just gonna, I don't know why I decided to put that on, but I will move all of the stuff out of the way for Heroscape, and then we will move into the second portion of today's breakfast. So here we go. Alright, so for next we're going to take the game of the day and add a random game mechanic into it. So we're going to pull up our wheel of mechanics and spin it, and pull up our screen share, our tablet. I don't know why I'm having connection issues these days. It's being funky. Alright, that's good to go. So we got a cube tower as our mechanic. Let me get the pen feature on, not the eraser. And we got cube tower plus Heroscape. So we are going to, did we already stop sharing? Nope. Alright, we're going to reset. So for those of you who are new to this segment, what we like to do is once we've talked about a game of the day, we will then go to our trusty wheel of mechanics and spin it and end up with a mechanic that doesn't currently exist in the game. So if we end up on programming, we'd probably have to roll again because the shield aspect of Heroscape is already in there. And so once we have a mechanic that's not in the game, we'll pull up our 5-minute timer and we will try and ideate around how we would install a cube tower into Heroscape. And so I'm going to start the timer and see where we get to. Alright, timer is going. So we have Heroscape, and for those of you who don't know what the cube tower mechanic is, I know it's in Amerigo, and I believe there's a few other games that have introduced this, but it is a giant tower that has sections of the tower that are blocking the ability for things to drop into it. Sorry, I got an itchy nose for some reason. Gotta pluck the nose hairs. But what you'll do is you'll drop cubes into the tower, you'll gather them, and based on how they fall, some will get trapped in, and then some will spill out into the pool. And that is the essential mechanic of what a cube tower is. It's also in Dead Reckoning and Return to Dark Tower. Those would be two other cube towers that were stuck in my head while I was explaining. But what we have to do now is we have to introduce that to Heroscape. And I'm rambling to allow my brain to come up with a couple quick concepts. But the initial thing I would potentially link it to is that I would I would use it to replace the attacking system. So instead of dice rolling, you would have, I'd probably just take the Dead Reckoning system because I think that is a fun way of doing it for a cube tower. And so if we're looking at the top view of the cube tower, we would have something like this where there are each card would have abilities based off of cube types. So maybe we have black, gray, brown. Would we want to assign a different color to a different character? Probably not. But we would have that, and you drop them in, and based on where they fall, there would be, abilities that trigger based on the spaces that your cubes land into. And so, for example, we'll use chat's favorite, the Deathwalker 9000. And so his typical specials are, he has an explosion special, which is a range of 5, attack of 3. Choose a figure to attack. Any adjacent figures chosen to the figure are also affected by the special explosion attack. Deathwalker only needs clear line of sight for the chosen figure. Roll 3 attack dice once for all affected figures. Each figure rolls defense dice separately. Deathwalker can be affected by his own explosion. And he also has range enhancement, so if any soul guards are adjacent to the Deathwalker, add 2 spaces to range. So we wouldn't be modifying that first effect, but potentially for the second effect, it has you roll or drop 4 black cubes into it. So maybe there's no color coding to them. There would just be 2 team colors of black and yellow. My college school colors. And so team 1 would have black, team 2 would have yellow. And so each attack has a number associated to it. So for its explosion attack special, you would drop 3 dice or 3 cubes into the tower. And if they landed in the 1 sections, potentially that would allow you to deal damage to 1 adjacent unit. If they dropped into the 3 section, or the 2 section, you would be allowed to target 2 for the full, and then if it landed in the 3 section, it could target everyone, but it would, you would need 2 cubes in there for it to deal 1 damage or something like that. And the attacker would drop their cubes in, and then the defender would then, or maybe we could try it with the same mechanic as Dead Reckoning, where the attacker will collect the cubes that the defender is using for defense, and the cubes that land in the first section for the defender are normal. The second section are maybe times 2, so there's double the strength of each shield, and in the third section they're halved, so you need 2 cubes in there to block full damage. That would be perfect timing. So that would be an explanation of a standard attack. And so to recap, our challenge was to take the mechanic, a cube tower, and insert it into Heroscape, which was our game of the day. And so what we came up with is that instead of rolling the skull and shield dice, you would have each team would have a set number of cubes that they'd start the game with, and the attacking and defending of the 2 players, so the Deathwalker and Tauren, for this example. If Deathwalker was attacking Tauren, you would collect cubes from the attacker based on its attack, and you would collect cubes from the defender based on its defense, and the attacker would drop all of them into our cube tower, and they would spit out and land in these zones of 1, 2, and 3. And before I'd ideate further and make the asymmetrical powers and all that, I would first probably play with the base side of the characters to test this out, and then I would 3D print a dice tower, or a cube tower, and probably attach a piece of cardboard or cardstock to it, and just make zones where there is effect for where the cubes land. And the next time we played Heroscape, I would substitute that method of attacking and defending with the standard dice roll and see how that works to test out how this mechanic of a cube tower would work in a combat style or skirmish game like Heroscape. So let me know in the comments below if you can think of a better way to add a cube tower into Heroscape, or comment below if you think that there would be a better mechanic that you think would upgrade the attack style of Heroscape, because personally I think that attack style system could use a refresher to draw me back in. The dice rolling mechanic is probably my least favorite mechanic of the game itself, just from the story time perspective, which I promised I would get back to in a previous video, or earlier in the live stream, depending on how you're watching this format. The Deathwalker 9000 has 9 defense, but there's been plenty of games where the Deathwalker rolls 9 dice and 0 shields pop up, and because it only has 1 health, it ends up dying, sometimes on the first turn. The first game one of the first games I ever played with Michaela, my fiance, she drafted the Deathwalker. She's like, oh, 9 dice? That sounds perfect. I don't need to worry about having this thing die soon. And the first time I attacked it, I believe I rolled 2 dice and got a skull. And she rolled 9 dice and got 0 shields. And it left a sour taste in her mouth for her first impression of Heroscape. That's story time with Sam. So now we're going to move on to the last portion of today's live stream, where we're going to go to letsmakeagame.net, and we will get an idea generated from this random idea or game generator, where it will pop out a genre, rule, setting, and theme for us to design around. So let's generate. And we got run and gun, don't stop moving, mythology, and patriotism is our game concept. So now that we have our prompt, let me get that in the screen a little better. Maybe. Yeah, sure. Let's close out any ads so they don't start playing and scare us during our design window. And what we'll do now is we'll set a 5-minute timer to see how far we can get in today's brainstorm. And then once the timer goes off, we'll recap where the game design is at, and finish off by saying what the next steps we would take to get this concept to a playable format, to see if it's a fine idea or a floppy piece of junk. So let's start the timer. Alright, so we got run and gun, Don't Stop Moving, Mythology and Patriotism as our prompt for today. We got Michaela in chat saying mythology and patriotism, confused by the combo of the two. I agree, so I probably will end up ignoring one of them. But we got a run and gun, Don't Stop Moving. So potentially it is. We haven't designed a cooperative game in a while, so let's do that. So it'd be a 2-player only game for the sake of design. So we got player 1 and player 2, not R, P2. And we have the board state where potentially we have our starting position for player 1 and 2 and our goal. And what we're trying to do is there's a random path generated maybe. And so this would be a grid style board. And I apologize if I'm mumbling. I'm just trying to figure out where this design concept is leading us. So we have our dashed imprints. That's probably really annoying to listen to. Alright, so we got our game board of the randomly placed tiles, and each player has 2 actions that they can take. And the concept in my head is that each tile will have a number associated to it, where there's some sort of indicator on each of the spaces, and once a person moves onto it, this tile will rotate. And so it starts with, okay, this tile has 3 times that it can be touched before it, or turns where someone can be on it, and after the 3 turns expire, that tile would be gone. And so you have to continuously move towards the goal, because eventually these tiles are going to end up disappearing as you touch them. In certain video games, I know like there are platforms that are not constant. So the first game I think of is Doodle Jump, where if you jump on it too many times, it breaks. So there are certain tiles that only have one space that you can touch. And the reason that you have to constantly move is there's potentially these bounties that you have on. So there's mythological. So using Greek mythology or whatever mythology that we want to paste onto it, there are monsters and beasts that are trying to attack our country. And as patriots of our country, we are trying to jump up into the space because they're invading to defeat them. And when you Kayla said you're such a noisemaker. Excuse you. Back on top, because we got 45 seconds to see how far we can push this. And say there's some sort of like action system here where you have 3 actions that you can use, and then there is a market that has more actions that you can upgrade with, but the cost of them is for the currency in this game is the blood of the beasts that you destroy. And so on your turn, you're potentially discarding and playing one of your action cards to get to the end or to move. And that is the timer. So let's see if we can package this game idea in an elegant way for us to leave off to test in the future. So to recap, where we got is our prompt for today was a run and gun style game that you don't stop moving. Those those were kind of easy rules to design around, where the setting is mythology and the theme is patriotism. And so what we have ended up with is a two-player cooperative game, so either two-player or solo, where each player has 3 action cards on their board at any given time. And the goal of the game is to destroy all of the mythical monsters that are coming to invade your country, and get to the goal and safe zone before, or as a group, to win. And so how you do this is by on your turn flipping over and using actions. So potentially the mechanic would be that you have 3 actions. When you take one, it gets flipped over. And then when you take another one, you flip that over and this one refreshes. And so maybe instead of flipping them over, they'll rotate. So when you've exhausted an action, it's turned upside down. And then when you exhaust another action, it turns right back up. So at any given time, you have 2 different actions you take, and you can cycle it that way. But on your turn, you are allowed to perform a move action and a attack action. And when you move onto these different platforms, they only have a limited number of touches that they're available before they disappear. And so they'd have on each side of the tile a number associated to it, and there'd be an indicator on the platform of how many touches the team can use it for before it disappears. And the turn structure would be move, attack, buy, mab. And so you would alternate back and forth between players, moving, attacking, and then as you start building up experience, being able to buy new actions. And the goal of the game is to make it to the end of, vanquishing all the invading mythical monsters and to successfully land back at home base as a team. And if you do that, you win. And so how I would test this is I would create the map, and I would probably start with movements of I would have to figure out what makes the asymmetrical nature to it, but I would probably test the overall concept where instead of taking the moves and actions here, I would say you can move 0 to 2 spaces, and then the action is rolling d6. And in order to deal damage to the aliens or the mythological beasts, you have to roll higher than a 3. So if you roll a 4 to 6, you deal 1, or a 4 to 5, you deal 1 damage, and a 6, you deal 2. And I would then assign health points to maybe the different monsters here, and probably generate a couple different maps or figure out a way to randomly program that, where maybe I would start by I would probably start with a simple map of divide it into 3, 5 quadrants, sure. And so we'd have that there, and we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Something like that. And I'd probably create that map and then say that these probably just simulate where the actual spaces are for tiles to go. And I'd start with something like that. Of the colored in spaces are like where you'll randomly place these tiles, and you'll roll a probably D4 or a say like a D6 maybe, and so we'd figure out what dice we would roll, but you would roll it to set up the map, and we would ignore the buying system for right now. And so to test this game, we would create the map, we would create the tiles that are 1 through 4, probably test it on tabletop simulators, probably the easiest. And so I'd make a bunch of monster tokens that all have different health values to them, and put those in a one of the tabletop simulator bags for pulling out to seed the board. I would then either create a random script. That sounds like a lot of work. So I'd probably use a D4 to roll for each tile that we put out to see how many spaces that it can live on, or the player can be on it for a turn before it disappears. And that's how I would test it. And if that overall mechanic felt like a playable cooperative game and created fun conversation, I would build off of it to try this first mechanic of having 3 different actions, exhausting one to be able to use that turn, and then reflipping it of potentially different attacks that you can do. So maybe we'd keep it always moving 0 to 2 spaces, and I would go from there. So let me know in the comments below if you think this is even a fun idea that you'd like to test out. If you like content like this, where you get to watch my brain try and come up with a game concept in 5 minutes, feel free to subscribe. I go live every weekday morning, and I will be posting videos to recaps of each video split up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday starting next month. So I'd love to hear your feedback, and that today concludes Board Gaming Breakfast. I hope everyone has a great day, and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Have a good one.